Hey y'all. Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside, and today we are talking about Octavia Butler's plays art. So as y'all come on, let me know if y'all can hear me. Let me know if me. I am coming actually live from the hospital. Had a loved one in surgery all day today and just getting out. And so I'm still up here at the hospital, but I did want to at least give us an hour to talk about this book. So let me know if y'all can hear and see me clearly. I am on the hospital's Wi-Fi, so you know, you know how that goes sometimes. But yo, welcome. I'm super excited to talk about this text. I know a lot of people, some people liked it, some people didn't like it. You know, totally fine. Let me tell y'all, when I first read the book, Uh, oh, someone say I'm dropping out. Oh, am I dropping out? Oh, that's not great. Am I clear?
You clear for me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And if y'all want to come on up, come on up. If not, me and Tina, we gonna have this whole discussion. Um, but yeah, so let me tell y'all what I did when I first read this book. I was a graduate student and I did not read Survivor. I did not have access to the text. And I wrote this really horrible blog post. I wish I never wrote it, but it's still up. I wrote this really horrible blog post talking about I don't know why this story needed to be told. This is, an elementary book. Like it doesn't make sense. Like I was literally going in. And then I read Survivor and I had to recant. So I was like, dang, I wish I never wrote that. But when you notice a big gap, I came straight from Mind of My Mind, and you notice that big gap, and now you're meeting a clay arc. You're like, what the heck is happening? Or not meeting a clay arc, but you know that there's this disease happening that's turning people into clay's arc. I, I read her for filth. I ain't gonna lie, I read it for filth, but I since corrected the error of my ways. And so I know a lot of people had mixed reviews about the text. Some people felt that the book felt like a standalone book. And I think one of the reasons, and if y'all hear that snoring, that's my family snoring because on the surgery medication. But what I was going to say, oh, so there were mixed reviews. Some people loved it, some people didn't. Some people said that it felt like a standalone book. And one thing that I want to remind everyone of is I can understand how, uh, how that can feel, but also remember that this book is a background book for what you're about to encounter in Pattern Master. So ultimately, Butler, the clay art book, is telling you how the clay arts came to be in a way, right? And so if she would have just dropped you into, well, let me not say if she would have, because she did drop a lot of people into the world of clay's art and the patternist when she first published Pattern Master, which is the next book we're going to read. She published that book first in 1976. And so it was a standalone book at the time, but when she decided to create the rest of the series around that book, then we have Wild Seed, Mind of My Mind, Survivor, and Clay's Arc. So I just want to remind everyone that this is a background story. Also, someone posted something really, really great on the Substack. We had a quick discussion. I'm trying to pull up the Substack now. But I wanted to, the suggestion was that they felt that Butler should have kind of incorporated more characters in the book. Like this book feels like she jumped so far ahead. And one thing that I wanted to remind everyone is that it does feel like that. But one reason why you didn't feel that Mind of My Mind jumped so far ahead was because Doro and Anyanwu were still in the text, right? But we also have to remember that they were also immortal. So that it was a 250 year gap between the 1860s, so right before the Civil War, 1860s, that's when Wild Seed ends because it mentions that Anyanwu was going to take her people west. And then when um, Light of My Mind begins, there's a long gap, a big gap, I should say. Also, this series itself covers a lot of ground. And so when we're thinking about When we're thinking about series, this is what I want to say. When we're thinking about series, we have to kind of think about it in terms of the difference between a trilogy, a series, and also a sequel. So, Mind of My Mind is a sequel to Wild Seed. So those books are like this, right? Which is why you have the other characters kind of appearing. When we get to the Xenogenesis trilogy, that is a trilogy. So you know that Lilith kind of carries that series, or she appears in all of the books, right? But here in a series in its natural state, you only have to have interconnecting settings or themes or characters. Is this snoring too loud, y'all? Do I need to go into another part of this hospital? Let me know if this snoring is distracting to y'all. Um, but you only need those types of things. So I just want to remind everyone that the reason why Wild Seed and Mind in My Mind uh, seem so connected is because it's a sequel. Okay. So yeah. Also, before we remind people that future. So right now we're in some type of futuristic moment, but when we get to the next book, we're in a distant future. So it's going to feel so much further out. But remember that when we're dealing with series and we're dealing with time further out, but remember that when we're dealing with series and we're dealing with time, generally the characters or what's going on in other books will appear in memories or collective consciousness. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of lay that as the foreground for the text. And yeah, all right, let's get into it. Hi, pal, y'all. First, Christy. Hey, welcome to the panel. If y'all want to come up on the panel, y'all come on up. Hey, Christy.
Hi.
Happy
Yeah,
to have you.
I think you may have been addressing my comment that I
Oh, okay.
left about,
Maybe.
about how it seemed like a standalone alone book. Um, and I think it's because the first two that we read, and I think we addressed this in the chat a little bit back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
The first two books, there was a couple of the characters that transferred just a little bit. I just expected, I think, with Clay's arc, that we would hear of, maybe not see in person, but hear of Clay Dana,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of um what's the word I'm looking for, tie it back in a little
Mm-hmm.
way, like where
Mm-hmm.
where they would tie together
Mm-hmm.
almost. Maybe you're not seeing those in person, because I do, know that there was a long span of time in the first two, but I guess I thought that there would be a little bit of background, because even in Survivor, I connected it through the mutes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I am glad we read Survivor first, because I could see, where I can see where all of it's heading. I've liked all the books,
Okay.
and in their own way. Um, and I like this one as well. But at first I'm just like, well, there's so much and I feel like there was a lot left out of Survivor, but because you said it was so heavily edited,
Mm-hmm.
um, I kind of just pushed that to the side. Well, that was heavily edited. So,
Yeah.
like that was heavily edited. This is why we're not getting as much information. But then with this one, I expected a little bit more information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but then you made a comment to me, and I thought, I've read sequels and prequels and trilogies. I'm not sure that I've read a whole entire multi-part series.
Mm, Yeah.
So I had to go back and I had to look at that. I had to look at myself and say, well, you definitely have a point, and that maybe this is just something new to me. Um, with a complete change.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think that this
Yeah,
is
I
like,
think that
oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Tina.
I was just gonna say
Oh yeah.
like, I was thinking that,
Yeah.
I was thinking that, like this is my first time was my first time reading Survivor because I never had gotten a chance to read that. So Survivor and Clay's art always felt like what I like best, which is sci-fi speculative fiction, more sciencey fiction kind of stuff, right? I like that a little bit more than
Yeah.
I like fantasy. So I thought these were
Okay.
great. Like some mechanism that you can't quite understand, and you got new species of people. I mean, of new species that you'd encounter and all of that. I thought that was great. But in the chat, July made a great point about the contagions was like a pattern. I thought that was really,
Mm.
I thought that was very.
Oh.
I had to give a shout out to that because I was like, yes, that was a good explanation.
June, July. Can you come on up and explain that a little bit more about what you're thinking, if you're willing to? But yeah, so yes, I've kind of thought you would like this. I did. I did think you would like this more. Um, but I also wanted to go back to Christy and say this is the largest span of this is the largest time that any author, well, not I should say a black author, because I don't know about other authors, but this is the largest time span that any author has covered. So she has taken us so far. We've gone from what 1500s West Africa, and now we're in 2021 with Clay's art, right? So she has taken us so far on a journey. And, I think that when you're covering that much ground and you have these distant, but sometimes somehow interconnected, far-flung characters, it does kind of feel like, okay, what's going on? And I'm gonna say this, I want y'all to pay attention to this in Pattern Master. There is a passing mention of Doro and Anyanwu. It's a passing mention, it's in a thought that one of the characters have. And so I can't remember because I'm rereading it again and I stopped where I told y'all to stop, but I can't remember if there is in part two of the for next week, if there's a more direct reference or any information given. I don't think it is, but to your point about us getting to know Clay more and all of those things, I totally understand what you mean, especially given that all of the books in the series, not all of the books, Mind of My Mind, Pattern Master, and Survivor were all written in the 1970s. And then she wrote Wild Seed in 1980. And then she wrote Clay's Ark in 84. And then Clay's Ark in 84 leads us into her Parable series. Okay, June, July. What you say in the chat?
I said that it was like the pattern just made manifest with like a contagious form. That was like how I was seeing it, that it was the pattern was harder for me to visualize because it was all mental,
Mm,
and this was easier because it was I could relate it more to like a zombie book. And so, but to me, it's parallels the pattern in a way.
mhm,
Um, so it's just easier for me to visualize how the pattern is happening still in a way that is the Clayark disease. And then when I heard Blake say that it's almost like they can read my mind, they know what I'm going to do next. I was like, bingo. um,
mhm,
so
mhm,
it was interesting to me that I guess that's what Butler was going for, with at least with the telepathic seeming. I don't know that it's telepathy necessarily,
mhm.
but they're the contagion or whatever, the disease is making them so adept at reading other people that it's almost like they're in the
Mhm.
pattern.
I
Um,
like that. I
it's really
never thought about
interesting.
that. I never thought about that actually, and I like that. I like that. I'm gonna have to think about that more. Thank you for sharing that with us. One thing I also wanted to say before we get to Tai Chi and Emma ask her what she think. Um, I want to. I don't know if y'all saw my TikTok video when I was talking about the enclaves. Did y'all see that video? In the text that they're mentioning where Blake, Kira, and Rain lived, or they lived in the enclaves, right? Walled communities. And what I said in the video, and I want to say it here so everyone can hear it, that is a cast towards parable of the sower. So this is where the privileged people live inside of wall communities. They don't deal with the sewer rats, the rat pats, all of these people. And so while we don't get to see the inside of wall communities or the privilege of wall communities in this text, we have like, you know, thoughts about them or references to them. We do get to see inside of those communities in parable of the sower. So I just wanted to like tie that in because all of the series are interconnected and they build upon each other. But what one thing may be called in one text is just called something different in another text. And so I just wanted to, you know, remind everybody of that. Or if you didn't catch that one point or that one passing mention, understand that she was starting to gesture towards Parable of the Sower. And though it was published in the 1990s, she was writing it during the same time that she was writing in the 1980s, writing these books. Okay. Tai Chi, you wanna give us your thoughts?
I knew I was gonna like it only because of the science aspect and how these organisms kind of move like plasmids, which is, I don't know how I can simplify this, but I like the biochemistry that's going on in here, and what she's trying to liken it to does seem like she did a lot of research for that part.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very curious as to how she's going to tie it in later, about how everything really works when they, I guess, have children or pass this along by the scratching and everything, or like sometimes they just have to touch, a person even without scratching. I mean, I know you scratch to spread the disease, but the kind of touch and like kind of like the sexual high it gives to them is kind of like pille, when two organisms touch or two cells touch, depending on
Mm,
what type of cell it is, and how you can have sexual intercourse doing that as a
mm,
cell. Yeah.
mm,
So as a cell, you can do that and you can reproduce. And then there's, fission, and all of those things where they actually fuse together, but you don't have to. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm pretty interested to hear how she kind of ties that in.
mm,
In terms of like bigger picture, Eli is very interesting to me in that I want to hate him, but I do recognize the human will to live and how that pushed him to survive and just be like, okay, I'm gonna figure it out when I get here. So I can't really hate him off of that sense because,
mm.
when you're suffocating, you're gonna do whatever you need to survive. There's very many people, which I call them brave people, that would just give up. Like your brain mechanism. Like there's a lot of things that turn on to make you fight in order to live. So the way that she said, oh, like it's the disease that's doing it.
Yeah,
Human nature is also like that. Like you'll
yeah,
fight.
yeah,
And there's certain mechanisms like designed in your brain to do that. You can't help that. You can't fight against that. And those that do and are successful, y'all are strong. Like y'all are
yeah,
really strong because it's actually very hard to do the opposite. Uh,
yeah.
so I thought that was pretty cool and pretty interesting. But he's over there, spreading it and kidnapping people. So I guess that's hard. That's hard to digest. But I get it. I get it. not forming a hate train yet.
Right, we appreciate that. Hey, Kyla, by the way. So here's what I want to remind everybody. Okay, so one, this is a black male protagonist. So it's kind of weird because Kira and Eli are kind of the protagonists, according to Butler. Like they're kind of sharing that position. But I think we can say that Eli is the more dominant protagonist right now at this point in the book. And so he's our black male protagonist. Butler does not write text around black male protagonists like that. And also, I think that when in Butler's notes, right, and I've said this before, that she in the book, like she wants, oh no, that was an article. This is what I want y'all to remember. Eli, did y'all catch the references that he was part of a mission colony? Right? Boyhood minister, former boyhood minister turned geologist and astronaut. I'm just saying, the Bible says, the book says that he still read his Bible. He could read. People didn't read the Bible these days. Like all of these references to let you know that he was a part of a mission colony. Now, not the mission colony that was, you know, in Survivor, but he was a missionary. And so as a missionary and as a black man, so religion and race are playing a part in this, and he is trying really hard uh, to keep this virus contained, or trying to do what it's asking or demanding him to do, but in a contained way. And so he's trying to be very restrictive here. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why you can't fully hate him, because he's like he can't help himself. He has to do this thing. This is something that is forcing him. And if you try to stop it, like y'all saw what happened when Mita was trying to restrict herself from infecting Blake, the sweat was running into her eyes. It causes great pain to try to restrict yourself, and the organism will not let you do that. The organism won't. And so I know in Butler's note, she also said that she wanted to write a book. One, she did heavy research on viruses and cancer. Also remember that Kira has leukemia, which is different. I'm releasing a article on Sunday, y'all. If y'all don't want any spoilers, don't read it. But I'm releasing the article that was a job talk that I gave on this to kind of give a different perspective. But she researched these two things because she saw where we were maybe heading. I think one of the reasons why I think this book is fascinating is because of the virus factor. We just had a virus and sweep through our world. And someone on the panel said, I'm interested in seeing what the kids become. We're still figuring out, not saying that people who had this virus, children will come out with any complications or illnesses, but we just don't know yet. And I think that we did see Jacob in the book, and he's like a Sphinx character. I mean, I think that was fascinating for Butler to kind of consider what would happen if this virus happens, and then you get the virus, and then you reproduce. What would that do to your children? We still don't know.
Yeah, I tried to hate Eli, but I couldn't. I was like, we need another, a hate stand going on right now. Like, let's see if we can make this happen. And because at first I was like, I was a little confused as to whether or not they agreed to kill themselves, and then at the last minute he chickened out and did something else, or did he kill them? Like that hasn't been. It's maybe I missed, didn't read it close
Well,
enough.
we didn't get to the point of that, but the organism won't let you die.
Mm.
You cannot, even if you try, it's going to continue living. It's going to
Mhm.
heal itself quickly. So,
Yeah, it just like when I found that out, I was just from this day, and like at this point, I was just like, so everybody else died, and then you just rescued yourself, and
mm,
kind of went out there. I know what he's trying to do. Like he said, he's
hmm
trying to stay away, but he can't stay away, and he's having all these problems, and he knows that. And I
hmm
also thought it was interesting that he was somewhat accepted because he did know the Bible, and
but but not accepted enough to marry
yeah,
the white girl.
of course not.
Remember that. But
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no,
Yeah.
that was. I
Okay.
mean, I just found it to be interesting that like he was somewhat accepted at that point at the beginning because he understood the Bible. They
Er,
found him of
Yeah.
interest, but then when they found out that
Yeah.
what's her name was like feeling him or really trying to get with him because she was literally like throwing herself at him when he was trying to resist
Mm-hmm.
her. I just found that to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to resist you. I don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
this, and she's like, "Oh no, come get this."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Throw it in a circle.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah, and I think that points back to that old myth of, what kind of motivated the lynching rituals in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even a little bit into the 70s, that, this belief that white women were not attracted to black men. And that's totally not true. That's one of the reasons why Ida B. Wells was run out of Memphis, because she was talking about the threadbare lie, and the white southern genteel men uh did not like, sorry, the snore, did not like the fact that those black women was kind of commenting or calling out white women's sexuality. And so the white men, of course, burned down her newspaper building and chased her out of Memphis, threatening to lynch her, because she kind of said, we don't believe that our men are touching your women are the aggressors. And so that's what we also see that with Christian, who is Mita's brother, um, kind of say, like, what did he say to you? What is he doing to you, when she is the aggressor, right? But it wouldn't have mattered, because if she would have said something different, he probably, would have found himself in trouble. But yeah, oh, someone else wanted to go. Okay, so do you all feel, and then before we get into the questions, or we can get into whatever y'all want to talk about, do you all feel that it was better for us to read Survivor first, just in case I teach this again, Survivor first before this book? Did it help you bridge any information?
It did. I think it was a good. I think it was good because now you know that that's part of it. So when he lands back on Earth, you don't. That's the connection for you.
Okay.
Like you don't have to necessarily go back to a pattern of story
Mm-hmm.
per se because we know he was part of one of those missions and we learned what happened on the missions and we had the background from
Mm-hmm.
Survivor to understand how he may have gotten, how he may have come back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I just didn't want us to go from mind to my mind straight to Clay's arc. Christy, did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I definitely agree. I think it made it a little bit easier for me, especially when they were talking about the kids, how when they had kids, the kids were different and they looked different. I guess that kind of was like, okay, that definitely tied in with Survivor a little bit in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad we read that first. I'm glad we
Okay.
read Survivor first.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? I see some people in the chat like it didn't matter. We should have probably read Survivor last. I ain't gonna hold y'all. If we would have read Survivor last and we would have went from these telepaths to these Clay's arc, I don't think it would have been a smooth transition, to be honest. I don't think it would have been jarring. I think, but you know, here we are. Someone said, yeah, pattern is a Clay arc. It's a wild jump. It is a jump. It's a jump, and it's probably one of the reasons why not I don't think there's any scholarship published on this book for real. Don't quote me on that for real. But I think within the last 2 years, the last time I checked for it, um, it wasn't any scholarship on Clay's art. And it could be because we really don't know what to do with this text without considering its totality in the pattern series. Anybody else?
I was
Go
thinking
ahead.
about. I like to think about like when especially reading uh, speculative fiction as a whole. A lot of times the books don't have to connect one
Mm-hmm.
thing after another. It's the world building.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the
Mm-hmm.
world building is still there. So Survivor helped us to link between mind over mind and then into this Clay's arc because now we know these people eventually became missionaries. They eventually it's the same it's the same universe. I don't have to have the same people in the same universe, the same world. And so that's a strong element that I love about speculative fictions, because you can get different stories without necessarily being tied to the same characters over and over and over again.
One way that I think about it is that there are multiple timelines, right? And there are multiple people living in this same world, right? And so what I mean by that is, while the first two books focused on the patternist, we still have humans journeying. Now we have Clay's arcs journeying. Like all of these people are journeying in different areas on the West Coast that we don't get to hear from. So therefore, when we get to Parable of the Sower, they're journeying too. They're in this same world. So we can
Mhm.
have all of these different experiences, but still be in the same world. And I think to me, I think it's kind of good to hear from everyone's experience, um, and to see like the dangers of a single story, right? And we do know that. Who said that? Chimamanda, Chimamanda Adichie. I hope I said that right. But she talks about this danger of a single story. And ultimately, in history, people get to decide whose stories are told. And I think for me, when I'm reading series writings, even if I'm reading N.K. Jemis's texts or Broken Earth trilogy, she's telling this from multiple perspectives. Okay. Anybody else want to share?
See, that's why you read Star Wars and Star Trek, so
It ain't happening.
you can have all kinds of stories.
It ain't gonna happen. It'll never happen. Oh, you need to get them? Okay. It'll never happen in this. Well, let me not say that. I don't like to look at them. Anyway, um, anybody else want to go? No. All right, y'all. Y'all want to say anything y'all want to say, or should we get into the discussion questions? All right, let's get into the discussion questions. I want to start with the second one, and it's titled "Monsters, Fear, and the American Psyche." And it says scholar W. Scott Poole argues that American monsters are born out of American history, reflecting deep seated fears of racial, cultural, and political upheaval. In Clay's art, who or what functions as the monster? How does Butler destabilize the traditional monster human dichotomy? And how does this reflect larger historical anxieties about contamination, hybridity, and control?
You broke up for me. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sorry, y'all. Y'all know I'm in the hospital right now. Okay, yes. Okay, so it says W. Scott Poole, and if y'all want to follow along these questions on the Substack, W. Scott Poole argues that American monsters are born out of American history, reflecting deep-seated fears of racial, cultural, and political upheaval. In Clay's arc, let's start with this question. Who or what functions as the monster? Who or what functions as the monster?
The organism, the
Okay, same.
contagion. The organism or the contagion font of at this point is the monster, is one of the main monsters, because it's
Okay, so
compelling him to do something outside of himself. It's infecting all these people. It's doing all this. It's like it's doing its own thing.
Hmm. I like that you did say the people or the clay arcs or the monsters. Because generally, when I ask that question, generally that's where my students go to. They like the clay arts because they are the deviant, right? They are the other. And it's so easy for us to other people in the world. And so that the thing that's driving, I guess, the clay arcs is the monstrous, right?
Right. Because otherwise, if you say the clay arts, then I have to hate Elliot. I can't. I'm not Eli, but I can't hate him because he says he has no control over it, and you can tell that they have no control. They are compelled to do it. They compelled to create this situation. They're compelled to have all of this stuff or whatever else. They have. It looks like he has like a little bit of control, but not that much. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but if he had like Duro, like full control, then to me, then it would be the clay art people.
Okay. Someone in the chat says we have car families, and that's true. We have people who are robbing people. We have people who are just doing monstrous acts just because, right? So couldn't we look at those people who are just unaliving for the sake of unaliving people as monsters in this text? Are they the boogeyman? Are they also the things that go bump in the night? I think we have a lot of monsters, if I can be honest, in this text, right? I think it's the monster. I was gonna say the monster. Go ahead, Tina. You want to say something? Oh, Tai Chi, one of you.
I was just gonna say it's perspective that matters on who calls who a monster. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you ask, why am I forgetting his name? If you ask the doctor who the monster is these people.
Blake.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Blake. If
And
we ask
Blake
Blake,
is a white man.
of course.
Mm-hmm.
So if we ask Blake who's the monster, it's Eli and everybody that came to take him and his daughters away,
Mm-hmm.
kidnap
Mm-hmm.
them, how they're forcing them against their will, all these other things. If you ask
Mm-hmm.
Eli who the monster is, he's going to say it's the organism. If you
Mm-hmm.
ask me, is it Mita? Yeah, Mita's son who
Yeah,
the
Mita.
monster is. I forget
Mm-hmm.
what her son's name. He's gonna say these weird
Jacob.
looking people. Yeah, Jacob. He's gonna say it's these weird looking people that came up in my house and is calling me ugly. So it's like it's perspective, which again
Mm-hmm.
why we need like the different POVs and different stories being told.
And I like what July said. Blake could be considered the monster because he left the compound, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
left knowing that you
You
have
could
this, you've
spread
been
it. Right.
infected. Exactly. And that's a monstrous act.
And
Um,
it's usually to the people who think they're right or the people who think they're in a position of power and they can't possibly listen to Eli because he doesn't know.
mm-hmm.
It couldn't possibly be that he's researched and, looked at a medical component to answer these questions. It
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be that he did all of these things and found out that everything that you're going to do is futile and you just have to let it happen. It could also be that he can't listen to a black man. It could be a lot of different things. So, you know,
Lactose intolerant, you want to come up here and tell us why you feel bad for the virus? Because I really want to hear, I want to hear it. I want to hear your thoughts. Tell us why you feel bad for the virus. You say the suppression of the virus feels monstrous in its own way. I'd like you to explore this up here with us if you are willing to. Um, but yeah, I agree, Taichi, that it depends on its point of view. It depends on who's speaking, who's experiencing what's going on for sure, who is considered the monster. Um, Anybody else? Okay, the second part of that question asks, how does Butler destabilize the traditional monster human dichotomy? And how does this reflect larger historical anxieties about contamination, hybridity, and control? So I think we should probably go with the second part of that question. How does this reflect larger, this snore is throwing me off. How does this reflect larger historical anxieties about contamination, hybridity, and control? Do you think we have anxieties around contamination, hybrid bodies? I know we have anxiety around control for sure.
I think we do. I think I want to answer the question in that she breaks the mold because these were highly sophisticated people who were astronauts, and they're the ones bringing the
Hmm.
virus, not the sewer rats. We normally think,
Hmm.
oh, it's the poor, they're dirty, they're unclean, or whatever the case may be, or it's
Hmm.
a certain demographic, they're dirty, they're unclean. We can't get into
Hmm.
them or we'll get anything. That's why, you put borders up. That's why you do all of these other things. But these
Hmm.
are people who you revered, who you were championing, who you put all over the
Hmm.
news. And they're the ones bringing back this virus. And a lot of you don't,
Hmm.
the masses don't know about it yet, but we do. So that's a different
Hmm.
perspective. In
Hmm.
itself, these were highly intelligent people, and they brought this back to
Hmm.
spread to everyone else. So
Yeah. And I think one thing as you were speaking, it made me remember, yeah, not so much today for us, but back in the day, when we're thinking about hybridity, I don't want us to just think of it as like a sphinx like Jacob is, right? I want us to think about what that means to be biracial, because those were some of the anxieties, the social anxieties at the turn of the century that kind of ignited the KKK. If y'all have ever seen Birth of a Nation, those anxieties around producing biracial children or children who could pass for white into society, right? And so when we're thinking about hybridity, I don't think it's as prevalent as racial hybrid. I don't think the anxiety is as high today regarding racial hybridity. However, back in the day, those anxieties were running rampant, right? And so that's what one thing that I thought about, Taichi, as you were speaking. Um, Anybody else want to go?
When you just said that about the anxiety around it, and I think that the anxiety isn't, to me, it may be in context, the anxiety is not necessarily that there are mixed race or biracial kids, because they have always been mixed race and biracial people. It always has been, because of the
Hmm.
nature of enslavement in this country,
Hmm.
and a lot of other stuff. I think the
Hmm.
anxiety is that it is something that is acknowledged or accepted. Like, I chose to be with X, Y, and Z person, or I'm choosing this person of another race. There are people who are making conscious decisions to do that, which is different, as opposed to like the presence of biracial children, because there were always biracial mixed race children. That's just the way it was.
Yeah. And what I mean by that is when I'm thinking about, like, when you mentioned the plantation, I'm thinking about why we needed the one drop rule in the first place,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if your mother was black, then you were black, right? And even you see that reasoning in Frederick Douglass's text when he's talking about why the children generally follow the condition of the mother and not the father, because the white slave owners were sleeping with these women and producing these monstrous, or air quotes, looking children. And while it was always there, it was, you cannot be considered one of us. And I think that's where the anxiety comes from, the diluting of this pure uh, race.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's evolved into a numbers thing, because
Mm,
that's where what the eugenics is. Well,
mm-hmm,
they're out populating us now,
mm-hmm,
and if we interbreed or if we hybrid, then it's adding more to their numbers than
mm-hmm,
ours, or whatever
mm-hmm,
dumb things that they're talking about. But I think there's also anxiety. The anxiety that we don't often consider is the anxiety of the hybrids. Now the
yeah,
hybrids are here, and
yeah.
they have super anxiety. I know there's these biracial, there are biracial kids that were crashing out on TikTok at one point, like last year. It was like a lot of like, where do I fit in? Where do I do that? I
Oh, I
have a
see.
white mother, what does that mean,
Mm-hmm,
as opposed to if I have a black mother? So there's a
mm-hmm,
lot of angst in
mm-hmm,
their being inside them that
mm-hmm,
provides a lot of discussion that we don't
mm-hmm,
normally consider. Like, everybody's
mm-hmm.
just like, okay, what does it mean if you're on, either side?
Yeah,
What anxieties do you have about being making a hybrid? But we don't consider the anxieties of the said hybrid.
yeah. And we don't say this in the usage term now, but it was something called the categorization was the tragic mulatto, and we're thinking about some of the stereotypes or caricatures that were rising in the early 1900s. And generally, the tragic mulatto was exactly what you just explained, or suffered from what you just explained. They were too black or too dark to be accepted in white society, but they were too yellow or too light to be accepted into black society. And then that's when you start to get the birth of the brown paper bag test that was prevalent in the South, and all of these things that happen. So they do have anxieties. You don't fit with them, you don't fit with them, but you're walking this middle ground, which is why they call them tragic, or refer to them as tragic. Hey, lactose intolerant, you up here You wanna?
Yeah, just in defense of the virus. I don't
Okay.
understand fully why I decided the virus was my protagonist for this book, but it is. Um,
Okay.
so the virus, like all we know about it really is that it keeps trying to like live and replicate itself, which is the basic concept of life, right? To live, to reproduce, to colonize, to die. And
Mm,
so like the virus made this intergalactic trip across the universe to a brand
mm-hmm,
new planet where it
mm-hmm,
gets to start a whole new colony to survive. And it
mm-hmm,
gets stuck in this one guy with these like ambiguous morals about whether or not he's okay infecting humanity, but he's also a carrier and that is like the virus is then sort of controlling him to make him do it.
mm-hmm.
But like he's suppressing it the whole time. And that poor virus just wants to live. So I just kind of want to see the virus like be released and see what that reaction is. Because
We
it's
gonna
just trying to do
see.
its thing.
We gonna see. We gonna see.
That's all I
We
got.
gonna see. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Shanadi, did I say this right? Shanadi, I think.
You said it right.
Hey, welcome to the
Hi.
panel. What you got?
No, I was just gonna talk a little bit about what you were saying about the anxiety of the hybrid, and just tying that with the anxiety of people who are othered in this society, and just some of the stigma that people have to deal with, and the anxiety that goes along with that, just because they are, they're not like, you know, they're not like the standard, or not like the beauty standard, or not like the
Mm,
body standard. There's a lot of anxiety that goes along with that. So I just wanted to mention that.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think everyone experiences some type of anxiety, you know? And I think that when you're entering a society where you are the other, you're not accepted, that may be you will be met with more mm, aggression in a way, which is why Blake is quick to dehumanize them, call their children things, that thing. Is I think what I want you all to do to pay attention to in this next part is what comes out of Blake's mouth in describing the other. That's what I want y'all to do. Just pay attention to that. Sir Maxim said Doro was the virus. Yeah, we can't keep blaming Doro now.
Yasmin Adi
Mhm.
asked, what, without a human host, how did viruses survive before? So they need your DNA and your mechanisms in order to replicate. That's like standard. So if they don't have that, they will die. There's a lot of them, but they will like either sit in isolation. Some could be like dormant, how you have like dormant seeds and stuff like that. But in order to multiply, they need a living host so they can
Mhm.
hijack your replication system and
Mhm.
reproduce.
And I think we see that they're not viruses, but they are gene traders when you read the Xenogenesis trilogy, John, Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. When you meet the Owen Collie and Dawn, they're doing the same thing that this organism is doing. It's just called something different. It looks a little bit different, but they need the human DNA. They need to partner with human DNA to reproduce. Now, the partnership does give benefits like it does to the host in Clay's art. Um, but they do need the human body. They do need the human DNA. Anybody else? Okay. Miss Tammy wants to say something?
I was just laughing. I was that was such a good question
Yeah.
about the DNA. That was
Thank
a good
you.
question.
All right, let's go with scarcity, privilege, and the politics of survival, y'all. I probably got 15 minutes left, and then I gotta get out this hospital and take the patient home. Okay. So we'll save everything else for next week. All right, so it's scarcity, privilege, and the politics of survival. It says in Clay's arc, Butler creates a stark divide between those who have access to mobility, health, and security, and those who. Let me start over. In Clay's arc, Butler creates a stark divide between those who have access to mobility, health, and security, and those who do not. The presence of cars, physical ability, and resistance to disease all function as markers of privilege in an increasingly fractured world. How does the novel use these material and bodily disparities to comment on the ethics of survival? And in what ways do the privileges of the haves shape their moral decisions? And in what ways does it force the adaptation of the have nots to define notions of agency and autonomy? I know I just said a lot. Let me go back to the question. It says, how does the novel use these material and bodily disparities? And I'm referring to cars, physical ability, resistance to disease. So, how does the novel use these to comment on the ethics of survival?
I think that was one thing that was the reason why they were taken, because they saw what they thought were, three able-bodied, which turned out to
Mm-hmm.
be possibly two, healthy people with a big car that could go in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of a negative um, for them, where they thought they have more, they've got these protections with their car. Um, Almost a little arrogant
Oh, for
to
sure.
think that they could drive into the desert with these things and nothing would happen to them and they would go
Mm-hmm.
back to their enclave and be fine away
Mm-hmm.
from the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what targeted them.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
was another one that was talking to Rain, and he said that he was out in the desert just for shits and gigs, and that's where he got taken. So I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree with Christy that that was like, because you have privilege, because you have cars, and only a certain amount of people have cars, and all the bells and
Mm-hmm.
whistles that come with those cars that allow you to travel through the desert to get to LA or any other place in the far east, west coast that they were going. It just, you think that nothing is going to happen to you.
Yeah.
It is arrogance.
Yeah.
I was
And the
thinking about
virus
this.
doesn't care. Go ahead, Tina. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that there's an old saying that says, you don't believe fat meat is greasy.
My
And
grandma
so,
used to say that.
and I mean, it just, because like they're telling him in great detail about what's going to happen, all of this stuff, and he does not believe them. Like he's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's what you say, but we're gonna get to a hospital and
Yeah.
this is gonna happen. And he's like, look,
Yeah.
if we do this, here's like, and he's logically laying out what will happen. You guys are stuck here, and I recognize that you want to get back, but you can't go anywhere else. If you
Yeah.
go someplace else, you don't even want to, but you're going to spread it like wildfire. You're
Yeah.
not going to be able to control it.
Yeah.
And
And
and the thing that makes me crazy is that he finds himself being attracted to Mita. He finds himself like starting to have like early signs of the disease that he know, like there's now evidence that there's something that's happening to you, and you still don't want to believe.
yeah,
Yeah, it.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it made me think of how our privilege sometimes can insulate us from the real world and people's lived experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking, just it's something that happened in my someone that I know who is a black man, and we were talking a few years ago, and the conversation just stuck with me. He was very educated, an engineer, like really high paying job, and his thing was, well, if we were talking about just getting stopped by, pulled over by the police, and what to do, what things. We were just having that kind of conversation, and his thing was, well, I wouldn't be caught in that situation because I'm educated, and you know, and I said, well, they won't know. I mean,
You want to
you're
know
still
that?
presenting as
Black.
someone who's been marginalized by
Mm-hmm.
society, so your educational privilege is not a
Mm-hmm.
protection for you. So so that just I thought about that when I was reading, just how Blake was so well, there are doctors, there are hospitals, there has to be a cure. We can go to the hospital and find a cure. That privilege of him thinking that, I'm a doctor, so I know there has to be a cure or something that can be done, can be so insulating,
Yeah.
from the real world.
Yeah, I was thinking about, Blake when Butler says that he liked to carry small amounts of cash, and then she said it was $2,000, and I'm like, since when is $2,000 just a small amount of cash to carry around? But also, I too once believed that my education would save me. And I told this story to you all before about being pulled over when I was headed to go teach at the prison. And, they asked me, like, what are you doing here? And I was thinking to myself, like, that was the first time that I had to account for why my body was in this particular space. That was the first time anyone had ever asked me. And I was kind of dumbfounded because I had believed the threadbare lie that if you go to school, you get a good job, you do all these things, certain things will not happen to you, even though I was headed to go do my civic duty at the prison. And when I got pulled over, I was stunned because I'm like, that ain't gonna save you. You a black girl in a white town. You off the road.
Hmm.
It's also I think the thing with Blake that made me, I can hear the hesitation of like why you would believe that. But when he basically said, my wife, who was an astronaut, who also was like this accomplished medical person, who had done all of this stuff, we literally have the best medical facilities or whatever else, could not find a cure.
Hmm.
Could not, like, it's not like he didn't say, oh well, we basically just prayed over it and put some holy water on it. He literally said, here's all the stuff that happened, here's everything that we did to this. He explained it to him from a medical standpoint because he said, you need to hear it this way, and he still was not believing it.
Hmm. Hmm. And even there
That
was,
was powerful.
I guess maybe in the beginning when Eli said, "Oh, I thought y'all had the stuff to cure that by now," and Butler writes that Blake was kind of shocked that he knew as much that Blake knew, right? And so it's kind of like this pissing match
Hmm.
that's happening. But the educated, are not the top survivors when the world collapses. We see this in texts, especially if you ever get to parable up the parables. It's not the educated that are up there doing it. It's even on the front lines. The educated are not necessarily the protesters all the time. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that just like the virus leveled a lot of people in our own world, it is also leveling people in this world. It doesn't matter what skin tone you are, how much money you got. None of that matters. The virus does not discriminate. Okay, next part of the question, I think this is all we're going to be able to get to. It says, in what ways do the privileges of the haves shape their moral decisions, and how does the forced adaptation of the have-nots refine notions of agency and autonomy? So this is ultimately a text about the haves and the have-nots, and also the next series. The haves have what type of moral compass, would you all say? Anybody? In what ways do the privileges of the have, so we're dealing with privilege and morality. In what ways do the privileges of the have shape their moral decisions? So think about
Themselves.
Blake.
Yes.
Themselves. It's themselves. It's not. Eli is saying, like, I'm trying to. I can only contain this in a small group, and this is working, but it can't stay there. If you go out, he's thinking about himself and his children. That's it. He's thinking about himself and his children. He doesn't. He does, like, for him not to consciously think, I will then infect all of these people and it will go and it will multiply like crazy. He's not thinking about that. And everybody who was like a biker, one of the guys who was the biker and some other people, they got it. Like,
Hmm.
okay, if we go out, it's gonna be worse for everybody, everybody's gonna feel that. So I think that the haves think about themselves.
Okay.
not necessarily the community.
Okay.
I completely agree. And I think my very first Butler book was The Parable of the Sower. And I I can kind of see a lot of parallels in between this because it's almost like there's two stories going on at once with the parable of the sower and this. Like, this is happening, and what's happening in the parable of the sower is going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess without talking about that, definitely, they definitely care about themselves. The people on the outside, the have nots, they're nobodies to them. They want to be protected from them. Um, they'll do anything to stay protected from them. So yeah, that's what I have on that.
Okay. And it seems like the have-nots have more community, right? Even though they do some crazy things, they do travel in community. They do count on community. Whereas it seems that Blake and his people, they travel alone in a lot of ways, or one or two people, right? Or people within their household. So, okay, yeah. Haji,
It's
you
like
want to say something?
the group trips in your 20s versus the group trips in your 40s, where or you're when you're 20s you're in the have nots phase. We need to
Mm-hmm.
five people to a room,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And as you get older, you get a little bit more wealth, you have a little bit more privilege, a little bit more position. It's I can only stay in a five-star hotel with a butler service, and I want what I want. I want my comfort. I want, my
Yeah.
serenity, you know, difference there. And also I feel like the have-nots, everyone is looking to survive,
Yeah.
whether you have or you have not. The goal is survival. The goal is, survival at the base is survival.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like those who don't have, they're more able to adapt and change and do what is necessary to, to meet that base level of survival. Whereas, the haves, if things don't, go exactly as planned, it's more difficult for them to pivot, I think,
Yeah.
than the have nots.
And it's generally, when you think about the economic crash of what in the past, it was the haves that were crashing out, and the have-nots have always
Hmm.
had not, and they were fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Tai Chi, did you want to say something? I think we're gonna
That
have to
was
end on you.
exactly what I was gonna say. Like at the basic level, everybody has self-preservation. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
like saying at the beginning, like is people are gonna do what they need to do to survive. It's very obvious when the have-nots do it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not so obvious. I mean, sorry, it's very obvious when the haves do it, not
Mm-hmm.
so obvious when the have-nots do it because
Mm-hmm.
we empathize.
Yeah,
But kidnapping people isn't nice. And like, yes, they
that's
have
true.
community, but we do have to like paint it in that lens.
Yeah.
He is preserving himself. He is doing things to make sure he's ensuring his survival. So I did just
Yeah.
want to make that known. Like there is selfishness, even how, because again, like Tina pointed out, I'm still trying to figure out how he's the lone survivor and how it seems some people had died before the crash and he
Mm-hmm.
survived. So there's still some iffiness
Mm-hmm.
there on how far he exacted or he enacted
Mm-hmm.
his will to live. Some of
Mm-hmm.
that is rooted in selfishness. So I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, I think it's low hanging fruit when we pick on the haves, even though they should be
Mm-hmm.
picked on. I do think I see the self preservation in all fronts, but I would agree that the one thing that the have-nots do have is community, because they need more people to scrap,
Mm-hmm.
because they're lacking the
Mm-hmm.
resources too. So if you don't have the technology or the resources, you do it in numbers, and a lot of wars are fought that way. A lot of wars that are won have been fought that way, especially by the have-nots. So, like, I see the self-preservation and the selfishness on both sides, and
Hmm.
yeah, the have-nots have
Hmm.
community, and I'd rather be with
Hmm.
them if they're scrappier.
Hmm. Yeah, when you referenced selfishness, I just thought about how people bought up all that toilet paper in 2020. I just couldn't. I'll never be able to forgive y'all for buying up all that toilet paper when the pandemic happened. Uh, but yes, hoarding. I think that this book really forces us to consider what will we do if something was forcing us to do something to survive. How will we act? You know what I'm saying? But we will get the rest of the answers that we need in part two of Parable of the, I mean, Parable. See, I'm tired, y'all. Clay's arc. I have to get out this hospital. So I'm gonna have to end us 25 minutes early today. Um, June, July say they're hoarding eggs now. See what I'm saying? So survival. People are in survival right now. Okay. So let's resume next week. Pay attention to the Substack. Of course, the questions are coming out tomorrow morning. They're already scheduled. And then we will resume next week. Um, oh, thank you. Yeah. So let me tell y'all what happened. I hope he don't mind. So it's ego lifting in the gym. He's lifting 220 easy, 250 easy. He's 41. And lifting, he's like, oh, I used to be an athlete back in the day, whatever. I got to lift heavy. And I'm like, don't lift heavier. So he goes for 275 for his pec. Tore it. For his pec, the first doctors told him wasn't nothing wrong. He didn't tear anything. Good news that he advocated for himself and went to see another doctor. They said yes. So they just had to reattach his muscle today. So it was a long surgery. And recovery has been long. We've been up here since 11 a.m. And so thank you for y'all well wishes. But y'all don't ego lift. Just lift with your body weight, okay? But yeah, I'm about to get them on out of here, get them on home. And I'll see y'all next week when we finish Clay's arc. Thanks for showing up today, y'all. This is the highlight of my week, and I love having y'all. Of course, next week we invite people up here with us. If you want to get up here and kiki, feel free to get up here and kiki next week. And don't forget, if you missed any part of this chat, it will be uploaded on the Octavia Butler Mixtape YouTube page. Link in this description over here. And then sign up to the Substack to read all the stuff that's over there. All right, y'all. Good night. Be safe. Be careful. And I'll see y'all next week.
Night,
Bye.
thank you.